It's called the chambers.
Yeah, I literally don't get it. So it's short meeting.
So the meeting starts at night, 10 o'clock, and really see this already.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so basically you come in and then when you batteries in the turn on the TV, turn on the wall TV, and then the small TV. That's what they're. So
is that connected to the Zoom feed?
yeah. So, and then you basically plug this in, and then there's the button down here. Push that in, that starts this. So, oh, just push that, and then so basically you have 3 cameras, right? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So they're right this one. So everybody likes, people have their own ways to do this. I haven't even programmed, so just have to memorize it or just a shot. So 2, 1, camera 2.
So those are 2 sets of 4.
Yeah, it's so if you go to camera 1, because here it's on that side. So camera 1 is sort of four. This should have to just section. But in order to set it, you just hold it down. So one, four. That's the some reason the signal is going through. So,
Second feedback.
camera one is, yeah, that's the live. So you have set up here. This is what's live. This is what's so you can see if you want to set up a shot. That's pretty good.
Switch from camera to camera.
So.
Second camera 3, it's sweet. Camera 2 is okay, cool.
So, and though that's all it really is. There's no presets. These two together. Six pulls back to the line shot. If all else fails, just go with line shot. Just two. Pull around.
I see.
If the worst comes to worst, just leave it on line shot.
Yeah.
Then you have to drag this. Yep. So drag this over. Maximize it. All of these single arrows. Sorry, comedian slide. Okay, then it's on.
All right, welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Hartford Select Board on Tuesday, September 13th, 2022 at 5 p.m. Our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us this evening?
I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, so we have a schedule tonight we need to adhere to. So we're going to take public comment now. And then we're going to go into our workshop if there is any comment by 5:15. If there is more public comment to be had, we can pick that up at the end of the meeting. We'll come back. And just a note to the select board, I talked to Gail and Tracy. They think what we should do is, after a brief introductory statement, is the board should move to the chairs here. They'll bring up the whiteboard and we can have sort of an interactive discussion. Because of that and because of where we'll be seating, don't worry about being recognized before you speak. Just, don't interrupt each other. So public comment will start in a room.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Lanny?
how's the camera's going to capture all that?
The camera, I believe, can capture us, can't they?
Well, the what?
And us
No,
sitting
if
there.
we sit out there, if we sit out here, is the camera going to be able to capture us when we speak?
Yeah, well, I'll show you. I can pull back on a light shot, which we'll see. Zoom over to you guys.
Oh, cool.
Okay, that's public should be able to know who's speaking with the.
Yeah, they'll be able to see it.
Good.
That looks great.
Thank you.
So public comment, we'll start with anyone in the room. I don't see anyone here wishing to comment. Is anyone on Zoom would like to comment?
Yep, we've got Mike Morris.
Okay, let's bring Mike over.
Go ahead, Mike.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate this and appreciate all you guys are doing. I have a question, or a couple of questions per se, but I have a concern about what has been happening in different situations over the last year plus. Talking about the town manager's position and everything else, what's been going on. There's been a lot of discussions here and there and back and forth, but my main concern is with the select board, majority of the select board. In the last short 6 months or so, I've seen one select board member called out for using the word superior in a statement. I've seen another select board member called out in a letter written to the public because of the letter that was written. The process wasn't handled properly, and accusations, assumptions, rumors in it. I read the paper of August 24th, and I was very disturbed to hear the one and only employee the select board has saying the town manager is working without a job description. I cannot believe any one of the seven of you would have your only employee without a job description. I think you'll find those job descriptions in statutes, charter, contracts, interviews, job applications, everything else. What disturbs me is that the board has called out some individuals for something they might say or do and worried about false accusations and assumptions. But I have not heard the board speak once about this statement in the Valley News, which to me is shameful if it's true that it doesn't have a job description. But if it's not true, why are you not speaking up? As a citizen, if I didn't know better and had experience with the select board, I would believe what was written in the paper. And I'd be very upset that we have $100,000+ salary person without a job description, but yet you haven't defended yourself in any way whatsoever. But yet we take the time in meetings to call out individual select board members if we don't like something. Can you respond to this and tell me, do you have a job description or not?
I can answer all your questions, I think. unless you have more. I'd like to point out, first of all, I don't remember us in public ever discussing a member using the term superior. If we had any discussions, those would have been done in executive session. So this sounds like something, that was not done in a public session of the select board and must have gotten out some way other how. And we've talked about the letter that Rocket wrote. He apologized for it. He admitted it was full of unfounded rumors, and he admitted that it was a violation of our process because the select board should have had the ability to review the decision to release it.
We're good.
We're not spending all our time calling out select board members. We're addressing issues.
Guys, I need to listen to it.
We are addressing issues when appropriate. As for the position description, obviously the position description for the town manager is laid out in the charter. She obviously looked at a description when she applied for the job and moved here. I think what she was referring to, and this happens a lot in the HR world, is that besides just the initial, thing that's listed on the application, they're not only just the requirements of the job, the goals that are set, other things like that. So we haven't yet come up with a comprehensive position description that includes goals for Tracy or spells out other things in detail, more detail than it is in the charter. Is Mike still there?
He's there.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I got muted for some reason. I wasn't quite done, Mike, when you jumped in to answer, which I appreciate you.
Yeah, you must have been
don't-
muted. I asked
Okay,
if there was more, so go ahead.
All right, well, that's happened several times to me in the past where I haven't even gotten back on, but I understand technology and problems. But anyways, I hope it's not an intentional thing.
It's not.
The person about the word superior was called out by another select board member and supported by other members at that meeting. But anyways, I think you owe it to the citizens to explain to them that she does have the Valley News still has it out there that she does not have a job description. And you've done nothing publicly to say that she does, to build some more citizen voters' confidence of what you're doing.
Okay, well, this is the first time it's come up since the article, but we're happy to do that. And everyone, if you want to look at the charter, you can. And we are in the midst of our evaluation process, which will also result in the kind of goal setting that we would like to see. Kim?
Okay. I feel you're quick to shut me down, Mike.
No, go ahead.
No,
Say more.
I feel that's twice now you jumped in while I'm still talking, but that's all right. I think I've gotten my point across. And you and I have talked about different issues before, and I'm sure, and I feel confident you'll be dealing with things, but I think the public should hear from you that she does have a job description, and that was false information being put out to the public. That's what I'm saying. So.
Thank you, Mike. Kim, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to note that I don't think it's our responsibility to refute everything that's mentioned in the local press. I value the Valley News, but I also know it's not always accurate, and it isn't our job to address every article that talks about anything that's going on in the town or the select board for us to review or defend or whatever. Like, that is, it can be asked as a question and then we can respond to it, but I don't think we need to scour all of the news sources to then make it part of our practice to automatically answer.
And so I do thank Mike for bringing that up. It's the first time that's been brought to our attention in public comment. Is there any more public comment? Lanny?
Is there anything on our website that has the town manager job description that I think you pointed to?
I think there's a link to the charter.
The
We could probably
website
pull
doesn't
it out.
currently have anyone's job descriptions on it. Some larger municipalities do. That's something that I haven't brought forth to the HR director and the rest of the staff, is if that's something we want to make publicly available. Part of the compensation study is a review of job descriptions as well, because we've always done that as an ad hoc thing. Some of them are old, they're out of date, and they don't reflect the work that's being done. But If that's something that the HR director and I want to discuss and see if that's a possibility, that is something that larger municipalities and municipalities with a heavy union focus typically do, is have their job descriptions available online.
Okay. Yeah, I just think that would, if there was one and we put it up, that would solve the issue.
I'm all for that.
I think we should put everybody's up.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a job description, put it up on the internet, that would be on the town website, that would solve this issue.
There's another hand up.
Yes.
Kathy Milisic, go ahead.
Hi, Kathy, whenever you're ready.
Hello, this is Kathy Milisic from Wilder, Vermont. And yeah, I would ask if CATV could not mute me until we're done, please. I've had the same problem Mike has where I've been muted before being finished. You might be aware that we've had yet another water main break in the old part of Wilder, somewhere along Hartford Ave. It happened yesterday morning. We've had so many of these. You can tell when you drive over the road, it's like a patchwork of patches. In the past, there's been garages flooded, the street's been flooded. I don't even know how many times it's happened. And I know DPW is too busy. I'm not going to bug them by asking about it. But I know that the ancient water mains on the road along Route 5 in the old historic part of Wilder are on your capital improvement plan tonight. And I would love to ask from a home where yet again, I have to boil water or buy it for several days. If you could please consider prioritizing that, especially as you're working toward infill for housing, in places served by town water and sewer. We just have ancient infrastructure that way predates you all, way predates our town manager now. And it's a necessity. I signed a note to the listserv saying we're suffering the same issues as Jackson, Mississippi and Flint, Michigan. And I wasn't kidding. So whatever you could do to help with that, a lot of us are affected. Got a lot of older people in the neighborhood. I'm lucky enough to have a car so I can go out and buy gallons of water, which each weigh about 8 pounds. And we're looking out for our other neighbors, but anything you can do for what really is a thickly settled, focused village to help prioritize that as part of your plan would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. We will definitely keep that in mind as we go into our presentation.
Thank you.
So, yep. Lanny?
Yeah, question for the town manager. Do we have a policy, or does the water department have a policy of how much downtime there is before they start issuing bottled water for residents?
I don't think there is necessarily a policy out there. I do know when we had a water main break in downtown, it was pretty hot that day and we supplied water to them. Let me shoot some emails out tomorrow morning and see what our estimated time is for that break and what we can possibly do, balancing bottled water and the need to get water to people.
If we have residents are not able to get out, especially, we need to be getting them some bottled water that's potable for drinking.
Yeah, and Kathy,
Cooking.
if you're there and you know of specific residents, please shoot me an email.
Should be a priority to make sure that they're not inconvenienced for too long. That's definitely a health concern. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have one more, then we're going to start our capital presentation.
So this is, go ahead, Rick Kenny.
Yeah, hi there. Okay, so I'm not a Hartford resident, but I operated the water systems there for 34 years. I just recently retired back in January. So I can kind of address what Lanny was talking about. And actually, Hartford, I've been on that main numerous times in the middle of the night with that blown out of with about 3,000 gallons of minute coming out of the ground on us. Basically, boil water notices are they're virtually mandated by the state as far as when they have to be. Pretty much almost any water main break requires a boil water notice. So it's sometimes they aren't really. It doesn't actually seem necessary, but they but they are. It's required just because we have to. The state is actually mandating it. And as far as that water main there, it's an old 8-inch AC main, water main. It was put in back in 1949, I believe it was. And it's been on the capital improvement list. It was on my list back again. I retired back in last January 1st. But it's been in the top 5 or top 10 of our capital improvement list for quite a number of years. So, at any rate, I just figured, I'm not sure if I just wanted to throw that in there. So thanks.
Thanks, Rick. That was really helpful to us. We appreciate it. Okay, so we'll end public comment and we will go into the capital improvement workshop, capital improvement plan workshop. So I think Tracy and Gail give us a little overview and then we will hit the seats.
I'm being 2 people tonight, Lana and Tracy.
Just stay there.
No, I'm just gonna sit down, not hit him.
Okay.
Feel free to join the audience.
Feel free to sit
It's a
down
packed
as well.
seat, so it's a packed room tonight. So let's be careful with our how much room we take up. So we're here tonight as part of a workshop, and like Mike said, we're gonna move the whiteboard. We're gonna get up and walk around. You all got a series of spreadsheets and a big workbook of different areas of work that we need to do in the town. So they're separated out by enterprise projects. Remember, those are our water, wastewater, and solid waste funds. And that money comes from user fees. So those have to balance. Where we really want to dig in tonight with you is the general fund reserves and the other projects. So those are the ones that aren't currently in progress. We haven't stuck a shovel in the ground, but we need to know where to go next. And that's where we look to you all as the elected body for the town to help drive that conversation about priorities. With regard to the general fund reserve funds, that's where we need to know where you would like us to put money in our savings accounts for certain things as we drive forward with the operating budget. So we're beginning to meet with staff. Staff are beginning to put numbers together and think about where they want to go with you in the next couple of months. And that general fund reserve sheet that you have will help us understand where we all end up. If anybody did the math on that, you can see it's a pretty big number when we just even roll the general fund reserves all the way through and sum it at the bottom. So tonight, our hope is to drill down on those 2 tabs of your workbook, make some decisions about where we can guide the rest of the staff and the department heads on reserve funding and where their priorities should go for the future in those other projects that we are not already in the middle of. We can talk a little bit about enterprise fund projects, but that might be for a little bit of a later date if we can't get through those first 2, because if we don't get through the first 2, we're going to leave some departments stuck, unable to make progress on their operating budgets because they won't know where to go for those items. So that's where I want to really focus so we can get that information to them. Something to keep in mind, something that I've been keeping in mind, and it's hard, is that we have a number of priorities in the town. And like Rick Kenny was saying, we have things that predate all of us. These are issues that have been on the books for decades in some points. We're going to have to deal with the tension of opposites, so to speak. We're going to have to understand that things that are important to all of us, things that are important to some of us, things that are necessary may be deprioritized or not funded the way that we would want it to be if we had a magic wand and a pot full of gold at the end of the rainbow. So this is hard work. This is the work that my department heads and I do every day, where we have to kind of think past ourselves, past our own needs, and listen to each other, and sometimes make those compromises that are difficult. So I just want to acknowledge this is not easy work. It is the muddy, plain, boring work that actually makes progress in the town. And my hope is that all of our legacies is getting some of these projects taken care of. So we no longer hear about a water main from 1949, and instead we can all go out and celebrate when that water main is now a more modern water main. And again, that is the boring, muddy work of government, but is the important work of government, is to make sure that this work gets done. We've got some fun stuff in here, some stuff that we think is really interesting and innovative, but we also acknowledge that we have things related to infrastructure and sewer and things that actually keep our town running. So with that being said, Gail, do you have any comments before we open up on your goals for tonight and your hopes?
I think think just a reminder that we're talking about capital, we're not talking about operating. So these are items that are outside of the day-to-day operations. So I just want to make sure that we stay focused on that. They're at the end of your budget book. When we do reserve deposits, we're also talking about if you would like to take debt out. Do you want to save or do you want to take debt? So those are things to take into consideration. Also, Tracy did provide a list of the reserves that we currently have. I do have a few comments on them when we get to them. If any of you have suggestions that you would like to use some of those reserves, there is a few things on that. We did receive our next ARPA deposit in August. So we're up to 1.4 million in there, because I believe that that'll probably be a topic of discussion today. And I did bring the last 4 years worth of deposits that we've made to the reserve account. So we'll have that to take a look at. I'm just really hoping that it's going to be really a fluid conversations, interactive. You're going to be out of your comfort zone. You're going to be over here, going to bring the whiteboard up there. And we'll start with, we'll go through each one of you. What is your top 3 priorities? That'll be one column, and then we can move from there and go over. And making sure that we keep in mind, which is the most important thing, is the board before you has made decisions on projects that they find that are important and that are being executed. So those can't drop off the list. We need to keep them in mind as we're moving forward to adding new priorities to each one of you that you decide as a board. And the last piece of it is, do you know how much of the budget that you actually want to contribute to the capital? We have a $20 million budget. Do you want to commit $1 million a year to your capital piece of it? So those are a few things to keep in mind as we're having this discussion and making sure that we're going to keep it moving. End goal, when we leave here tonight, we're going to know what the priorities are. So the department heads can write their budgets and we're all on the same page.
Question, Tracy, on the general fund reserves, on the second page, you've got listed for public works or bridges. To address bridge maintenance capital improvement plan prepared by Stantec, dated November 1, 2011. Do you by chance have that plan proposal, a copy of that?
No, that is just a reference for Public Works. That's the report that they would like to base that on. If you all funded the reserve funding from that, they would come back with specific where they want to implement that money.
I'm just wondering if there's certain bridges in town that are on the scale of really bad to good as far as how we can allocate funds on that.
This is where we
Based on
get
that
into that
plan.
kind of play on where you guys sit, is you say, here's $150,000 for bridges. And I say to Public Works, okay, you all are the subject matter experts. If I give you $150,000, where do you need to put it to do the most work for the most good and address the biggest issues? And they come back and say, here, here, and here. And we listen to those subject matter experts. So, really for you all, it will be another drill down as you get into those budgets to hear from people where they think that money can be of best use, because there are really our subject matter experts, but they need to know a little bit more about what their pot looks like.
But you don't know if there's imminent failure of
There is-
infrastructure within town.
There is nothing that is a severe health and safety issue. If it was, we would do what we did with the slope failure. We would go out and mitigate it immediately, and you would hear about it almost after the fact. So this is nothing that we're going to have a bridge. There is no indication that there are any bridge collapses imminent.
Okay, that's a priority. Thank you.
Just a quick question. I'm going to show my naivete. What about the funds from infrastructure that we were supposed to get from the government or have gotten?
Here's that hard thing about being a leader and resting in ambiguity. We don't know what those grant options are yet. We don't know about that or the Infrastructure Reduction Act. Those are going to come down at a later date, which is where we're going to rest in that uncertainty. knowing that we're all keeping track of those. And if we see something that's a fit, you may hear us say, we heard that that was not a priority for you, but we have found money for that. And so we would like to move that up in the priority list because that grant is available through the state of Vermont or the federal government. Unfortunately, we're all in the same boat because everyone's doing their budgets right now. And those two bills are massive and we don't know exactly what they're going to bring down from the state.
Okay.
If I have a couple questions, like before we go over there, can I clarify a couple things too?
I think it's great.
Okay, because I'm worried about not being able to spread out all these papers over there for sure. In the general fund reserves, the town office renovation, it's got balance of $12,010 and then it says 117,857. Is that a suggestion? Like I'm imagining these reserve amounts are annual, like per year. Is that suggesting that we put that much per year?
This is where Dana has come in and been really helpful. And you're going to hear him talk about facilities management a little bit when the budget's coming up. Unfortunately, that is per year. Our heat pump system, he estimates will need to be replaced in 8 years. Systems generally have a 15-year useful life, and we're on year 7 of the system. It was not until we really started digging into the HVAC system that anyone was made aware of the useful life of this system and how old it is. Dana right now estimates that replacing this heat pump system is about $825,000. So you see that and you divide that by the remaining time that we have to estimate the useful life. And that's where we come up with that 117. So it's a painful number, but I am incredibly thankful that Dana started digging into the systems in town, or else we could all be sitting here in 7 years with a failing heat pump system.
Gotcha. And so that reserve would literally like only be for heat pump, not for any other investments in the town?
Typically for things like patch replacing carpet cleaning, window cleaning, we run those out of the operating budget. The good news is this building is relatively young, so we don't have a lot of capital issues yet.
And the lighting, the parking lot lighting?
You're going to see the parking lot lighting next week in FY22 encumbrances. So once you approve that, we'll be able to make some movement on that.
Okay. And
if you improve the 22 encumbrances, one of the items in there is town hall parking, lighting.
And I just on that same page, so the Friends of Beachy Covered Bridge, the comments in the notes, it says has made funding requests to the board for fiscal 24. Are they going to do just an appropriation or something, or what?
They've come to you all a couple of times asking for funding. That is something that you'll see come up in the town manager group or the other section of the budget items with all of the other appropriations is those community groups. And that will definitely be something that I'll ask you all to dig deep and think about and have a decision in your head at that point.
Okay, so it will come. I was just worried it was going to slip between the cracks or something. But and then the last one on that page, the Christian Street Cemetery. So the $5,000 amount is not the rest of operating the cemetery will be in operating.
You'll see the rest of operating the sister cemetery in the operating budget. We do know that over time you have to do things like clean headstones, deal with the rock wall, the road. So the 5,000 is a nice little baseline to make sure that if we get surprised by anything, we've got a little money in there and we're not scrambling.
So can I just add a little bit about the Christian Street Cemetery? We received funding when we took the town took it over. So we have a separate account specific for maintaining the Christian Street Cemetery. So all of the expenses come specifically out of that bank account, not the operating account. The reserve that's on here, we're requesting to make an annual deposit because the money that we have in the reserve account is only going to last for a small amount of time. So in a nutshell, annually, we will, as a town, we will want to deposit that money into that reserve account specific for Christian Street. And that's how it will be paid from. And as we take on more cemeteries that are specific to that, specific cemeteries, we'll want to open additional accounts because you don't want to commingle cemetery funds with operating funds.
Okay, that makes sense. Uh,
Can I ask you a question on that cemetery, since you're on that subject? Do we have a number on the operating costs of the cemetery for fiscal year 22?
We do. I mean, we took it over at the end of the year, like pretty much the end of 22. There wasn't a lot of activity during the winter time for obvious reasons. And I don't have the 22 financials in front of me. I'm actually going to present them to you next Tuesday as well.
Yeah.
But again, we're still very, very young in taking it
Strictly,
over, and it's very difficult to know.
But none of the, okay, so I'm maybe getting out of line because these are, I'm looking at these in the wrong way, and they should just be capital improvement, not for operating, and that's my mistake. So, sorry, I'm getting off track here.
Right. So as
Yeah.
far as the cemetery goes, we do need to maintain it. And
Right, yeah.
again, anything that's done there, whether it's maintenance or any redoing the roads to get in and out of there. Those are all things that need to be kept separate from the general fund because they are specific. As we have individuals, families come in that would like to utilize the cemetery, those funds get deposited specifically into that account.
All right, sorry, get you off track. I apologize.
Okay, and I think just for this part, I wanted to just clarify, in the in progress projects. Here's the references, there's two projects that reference Courier Street, and I know, like Jeremy maybe has shared with you that the owner of one of the buildings on Courier Street has been very disappointed that the phase 1 and phase 2 did not include Courier Street. So I'm curious as to if either of these projects are, like, it looks like the one right below, the South Main, North Main, Gate Streets, White River Tip District project is the phase 2.
That's what you're seeing right
That's
now.
what we're seeing right now. So what is that one right above it, which says to be constructed with 23 South Main Street parking lot?
Yeah, I don't remember the last time you all got a presentation on the South Main Street lot. I think Hannah was still here, so I want to say it's winter of 2021, beginning of 2022. Is the plans and the engineering to completely do the South Main Street lot, so the lot that's bordered by the VFW and Tucker Box.
Just Courier Street extension, which is the part that goes up by Norton Station, not
Yeah.
the Courier between Gates and North.
Yeah, and we're still working on, I believe her name is Marcia. She had some questions and we're still working on those questions because I inherited the plans to that project and as did Jeremy Delisle. So we have actually escalated that to Aldrich and Elliott, who's our project managers,
Okay.
to get an understanding of
This
that.
is, I mean, it references Courier again on the upgrades to stormwater on the second or third page. I guess it's the second section. North Main Courier, Church Street, Stormwater, White River Tip District project. This says completion in 2022.
So that's what we're in right now. That's because that has multiple funding streams, you'll see it separated out in terms of whether it's stormwater, sewer, all of those sort of different infrastructure projects.
Okay, well, I guess if it isn't Courier between Gates and North Main, it should probably say Courier Street extension if it's only, because this, I mean, this says completion 2022, but does not include Courier for that phase 2 project.
Let me check in on that
Okay.
because I want to make sure that this works for all of us, not, and I don't know why Public Works and Planning have labeled it as such, and I don't want to mess up their labeling for this project if they have a reason for labeling it that way.
Yeah, then it translates better to us and the public, obviously. Okay. I'll leave it there for that.
So just to make sure, Kim, I'm clear on what you're saying. The Courier Street Extension one, which is being funded by the TIF district. And then the next one down, you're asking about as well, that's completion anticipated in fall of 22.
That one I think I recognize as phase 2 as what's going on right now. It's the next page or
Third page.
third page of this paper packet, third one down where it says North Main Courier, Church Street, stormwater.
Gotcha.
Upgrade of stormwater capacity in design and engineering phase.
That's targeted in 2023 cycle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Okay.
but it does say South Main, North Main, and Gate Street construction completion in 2022.
So,
But it still has career and church. in the
so,
career.
okay, so I think I understand where you're going. This note says that this project is in design and engineering phase to connect to the North Main, South Main, Gate Street construction.
Okay.
So it's a different project and it's working in conjunction with that project. And it says in line for future state clean water loan application targeted for 2023 cycle. Those are the other notes from Lori. So my understanding of this one, I get where you were going, Kim, and I'm sorry I initially got confused, is we're saying this is going to tie into the phase 2 project and work through that stormwater issue.
All right, we ready to rock and roll?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, I was having difficulty when looking at this on that first page, the general fund of reserve funds. Understanding how much historically has been put in, like last year, how much was deposited under each line item? Would that be reflected in the balance? Did it start at 0, or is that just a carryover balance year over year?
So I did bring the last 4 years of deposits that we made. I'm not sure, did anybody bring their budget book with them?
I have it online.
So if there's a specific one, I didn't make enough copies for everybody. I certainly can run upstairs and make copies if everybody would like a copy of it, so they would know what we've deposited historically.
I can also do a search if there's
One of the things too that is interesting and has ebbed and flowed with different boards is making that decision about how much reserve funding is. My position, a finance director position, the department heads, they can make that recommendation, but boards make that decision. So depending on who was sitting at that dais, they may decide to not fund it all, not fully fund, or make another decision to purchase that equipment. So there's no requirement to deposit a specific amount. It is solely by recommendation. You all will be making those decisions hopefully tonight, so we can get those into the budget so you can see how it's reflected in there.
Oh, I understand that. I think for me, just having it in the same sheet, just to historically understand what the previous decisions were, would be helpful, but
You can also grab, there's probably some annual reports with the 23 budget.
Gail, do you know where it's set in the budget?
It would be at the end of the book.
I don't know. Let me see if they're still out there.
That's right.
Sometimes
I
we
mean,
can-
I got it.
Okay.
Which
So-
fund number?
Okay.
You all have an appointment at 7:15. Okay.
Does she know which fund number it is?
For the reserves.
So it would be a 924. 1090, 924. At the end of 921, sorry. So if you have your budget book, it's pages 60 and 61. In the general fund.
Oh, I was looking at the.
I was looking at these numbers.
Yeah,
and
but
they're
I was
not-
in the, yeah.
So y'all let me know when you're ready to get up out of your seats. I don't. All
Everybody ready?
60.
right. All right. These whiteboard markers might be a little old, Gail, so. Okay. All right. I vacillate at times whether we should look at in progress projects first or general funds. Do you have a preference, Gail, since we have a limited time? Would you rather than focus on the general fund reserves or making priorities on the other projects, the other capital projects that aren't started?
Well, they definitely need to make the decision on the ones that are in motion. Continue to support that.
Okay.
We all need to.
So I think that's, and I can run the board or take notes, or you can run the board and I can take notes, whatever you would
I
like.
can run the board.
Okay.
All right, so thank you all for working on your labs. Let's open up the packet marked in progress. As you can see, many of these are already funded or engineered. So really, let's see, where I wanted to lean was, we want to look at the Route 5 sidewalks and bike lanes, because you do have an opportunity for matching funds there that we need to address. And then we also need to look at another one. I'm gonna grab a pen because I'm struggling with how deep this spreadsheet is as well.
You know the percentage of matching funds, basically, for that?
I think Lori's written that down for you on the matching funds. She needs a local, yeah, did you? I have a microphone. Is it on? It's on. Thank you.
Oh, okay, that's one.
That's why it's confusing.
So previously, you all did approve going for this matching fund, and we did get it. So we're a little bit down the road on this one, in that we've gotten the matching fund, and we'd like to, in theory, support this with the matching funds. In terms of whether you want to fund this, you do have a couple of opportunities. You can fund it through the general fund, through the operating budget. We can make a decision to move this through to ARPA funding, which we haven't had the greater conversation about, but that is definitely an income or revenue stream that you all have. Or we can look at possibly reallocating some of the reserve funding, but I really think your two main paths forward are to either choose to put this through on the operating budget as a reserve funding and then pull that back out, or look at your ARPA funding. Interested in thoughts, Lanny, and nobody's gonna be able to hear you, so now I feel like I'm at some sort of town hall.
So my biggest concern is that this is a new project that the town will be taking on, and I would like to see us focus primarily on what's broken right now instead of new projects. So is there something that's broken that we can concentrate on first? Even though we're getting a matching fund, this is going to cost funds that we could put towards fixing things. So that would be my biggest concern. So if you could lay that out first, as far as what's broken that we have availability to. Thank you.
One question on this one. This is, oh, thanks. One question on this one. This is like the area too, where they just changed the planning and zoning, right? To allow for like the mixed use, the Ballard Vale Drive. Okay, I just wanted to know, because if they refer to it at least in that as like the gateway to the town. And so I think there are two projects here, aren't there, on Route 5 that kind of run through there?
Yeah, you
Okay.
see those are the Route 5 sidewalk, bike lanes, Ballard to Arboretum, and then you see sidewalks and bike lanes, Sykes Mountain to Ballard.
Okay, so I just wonder if, with that change, if something like this would be a complementary piece to that. The idea is to try and attract different.
I feel like we're part of a choir it's an awkward choir. In terms of what is broken, what needs fixing that we already have, a lot of stuff, right? We need to work on a lot of sidewalks. We need to work on a lot of water mains.
$189,000. You go quite a ways to fixing up what's deteriorated from existing sidewalks.
But can you use matching funds?
But can
I
you,
can speak loudly. Can you use matching funds for what you're talking about, what needs to be fixed, or is this specifically designed for this?
Do we lose the grant if we don't?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
if we don't match it, it goes away. It's basically here's blank percent of the funding. You town of Hartford need to pony up the remaining percent. And this is going to, we don't know exactly what infrastructure and what the Infrastructure Reduction and the Infrastructure Act, Inflation and Infrastructure Acts are going to do. It's looking like the temperature is going to be that a lot of these are going to be, here's 80%, here's 90%, town, please pony up the rest of it. We're going to see some free money, but a lot of these programs are going to want us to show our commitment through a match.
Or the jewel settlement, I guess it is.
I haven't seen any indication, and they're usually really good about letting us know if we get a settlement, like the opioid settlements. I haven't seen anything to indicate we're getting that.
Don't they restrict those generally to like public health initiatives? Like if you get a settlement, that illustrates all that healthcare, like prevention programs. I don't think it's
Like, I'm inclined to take Lanny's philosophy in terms of the new projects versus fixing things, but I'm also very keen on leveraging, you know, $1 million in grants between the two. Okay. I do have it. I'll just talk. Okay, will do. So basically, I agree with Lanny's philosophy about fixing old stuff before starting new projects. But I also really like the idea of leveraging $1 million. And what I'm wondering is if what the time limitations are on things like these programs, these funding programs, in that, like I'm inclined to say, yeah, let's look at these, let's say yes to these if we get infrastructure funding beyond ARPA that can pay for them, or that there are sources of impact fees from developers that are going to build multi-use developments in that particular region, in that new zoning area, so that there, I mean, like, it's a desirable project, in my opinion. I would deprioritize it over fixing broken existing sidewalks. So is there a way that the percentage, the match that the town has to come up with, can we wait and see, can we say, yes, we want to do these projects if we can get infrastructure funds and or developer impact?
My understanding from Lori, and she puts this in her notes, is it's a target going out to bid in 2023 with a construction of 2024. I don't know specifically how long we have to say yes or no. So knowing that information, I'm not sure how long we have to do this work. Gail has her hand up.
I got a microphone.
Gail has a microphone.
So as far as most of the grants that we have, they're good for usually for like 5 years. And most of them they'll extend as well, because the world that we live in, even before the craziness that we're in now, things happened and we weren't able to get the projects done during that time frame. I think saying that we're going to go out to bid and we don't even have the funds secured yet, I think we should reel that in a little bit, but that'll be a sidebar conversation that Tracy and I should have. But again, usually you have a bigger window for the grant and you do have to have a town match. So I think going with, one of you said it, and I apologize, I don't remember who did, that if you would like to proceed with this project, dependent upon receiving those infrastructure funds, I think that there's a window. I think we have enough of a window there to make the decision. Yes, you know, we want to accept the grant, but or if we have the grant, if we've already received the grant, I can't imagine that we haven't designated town matching funds. So I think that there might be.
And I'm wondering if I'm getting this one confused with the smaller one that Jeremy's department did for the sidewalk infrastructure, but
Right, so both Lori and Jeremy came in front of the board at the same time, and they both asked for town matching funds and approval to apply for those grants. Lori's grant required an additional $75,000, which is included in the encumbrance request that'll be coming in front of you next week. And then as far as Jeremy's goes, DPW, I'm not sure what that amount was, but again, I mean, if we're accepting grants, applying for grants, and then accepting them, we as a whole need to make sure that we have the town matching funds to match the funds, because that's really important. So
I think the temperature of the room that I'm getting is that we'd like to table the idea of this. My math says 315 total, the 189 plus the 126. We'd like to just table this one for now and see what else is on the in progress list. the second line says, for match, have 34, need 126, 42 a year for 3 fiscal years. Is that, am I reading the room well enough to say we want to kind of hold on to this one?
Yeah, I mean, my impression is rather than saying table it, is saying yes, pending.
Yes,
funding.
pending other grant opportunities.
For the
Okay.
town match, for
For the
town
town
match part
match.
of it, portion of
Okay,
it.
all right, Gail's gonna write it down. It's going in the
So-
record. Hi, Dan. Oh, Dan's doing a thumbs up. Okay.
So just to be clear, that's the Christian Street Engineering and Construction, correct?
No.
Those are Route 5. Those are the Route 5 sidewalk and bike lanes.
First two.
I clearly don't have the same paperwork that you have.
These two, right?
Okay. That's okay. Thank you, though.
Sorry, I was getting ready to answer you and then realized.
Well, I guess just clarifying question. These federal grants have not been formally given to us. These are just opportunities. Is that correct?
You all approved us going for them. I can't remember off the top of my head if that's come back yet. It should be coming back soon.
Okay.
Whether or not we've got that.
Okay. So then we are basically effectively earmarking this money aside so that in the event that these federal grants are approved for us, that we have the money aside to meet our match. Is that correct?
What I'm hearing from all of you is that you want to hold off on allocating for the match and seeing what else is out there in terms of funding. Is this something that if this comes through that you would like to consider ARPA funding for?
I just don't know what that means.
I think it's, for me, it's because we haven't had the full comprehensive ARPA discussion, it's hard for me to answer that question. I would want to know what the full picture of ARPA is before saying, oh, yes, we can add this to the ARPA pile.
Totally. Okay.
Personally.
But additional infrastructure funds, but it does say in the notes, it says second grant obtained, not.
This has been languishing for years. They were supposed to construct in 2020. So some of those grants have been sitting there for a while. This is definitely before any of our times, except for maybe Kim and Dan.
So I feel like I'm getting more and more confused. Are these federal grant, I mean, this $758,000 federal grant, these 2 grants, is that pending or has that been granted to us, awarded to us?
I think we get it. Match.
You get it if you match it.
Okay, so what is the board saying that we do? Because I'm in favor of then coughing up our $189,507 in order to accept that grant.
What I think we were just saying was what the pulse of the room was that if we get more infrastructure, like let's move on and look at all the priorities. Because I would agree with Lanny that I want to do this project. I want to leverage grant funding, but I want to look at all the other things we have to spend on first and come back. And then if we get infrastructure funds, then we say, yeah, no brainer. You spend $189,000 of infrastructure bill money to leverage $758,000 of grant funding and start it. But right now it's like, let's look at the rest of the stuff first, because we're going to want to say yes to everything.
There's things that are going to come up that are not going to be able to have a grant for. We're not going to have any matching funds. We just have to pay for ourselves. And those are the priority items that have to come first before the matching funds. If we have any leftover money, you buy milk, you buy groceries, you buy milk, you buy bread. And if you have money left over, you may buy a roast. Okay. But if you don't have it, you can't do it.
But buying this roast is buying a $1 million roast for $190,000, right? So we're just tabling this conversation. And I guess my confusion then is what Tracy's mentioned of seeing if there are other federal grants that appear. What does that mean?
So, like we were saying before, we don't have full information on the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, both of which are significant portions of money that will come down through the state of Vermont. They're not direct allocations to the town. They're not that broad range like our ARPA money. They're going to come down through the state for specific projects that are specifically purposed. This might be a fit with one of them. It might not. We don't know yet at this point.
Dan has his hand up.
Hi, guys. Would it make sense, is the microphones on the podium sort of wireless? Could we take that off the stand and the people in the room could hold it so it'd have two going, or is there one at the table where Gail is so that we don't have to keep passing the microphone back and forth?
The microphones don't move, Dan.
Okay.
They have the one off the podium.
Yeah, we got a couple going, Dan, so we'll do our best.
So we're looking at.
Yeah. Be careful.
So can I just step in just for a moment? I think this is great. I think we're having a great conversation. I think, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I think it's really important for you as a board to maybe determine how much you want to contribute on an annual basis for capital. Because this is when we're talking about contribution for capital, we're talking about what the taxpayers are going to have to pay. And I know that's all on our mind, to making sure that we don't increase the tax rate to a point that that our residents can't afford it, but also we need to make sure that we're hitting the priorities that we need to hit. So I know it's kind of backing up a little bit, but I think before we can determine what you want to contribute, I mean, what you want to select for projects, I think you really need to determine what the amount is that you want to contribute. Because you may only be able to pick 5 projects if you're going to say you only want to do $1 million a year for capital. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that could be $1 million a year for capital, could be town matching funds. It could be your reserve accounts. I know that the fire department, the police department, Parks and Rec have very extensive capital improvement plans that they're depending on the board to recommend or approve that they get those annual deposits, because that's how they're making purchasing their equipments, they're doing the necessary improvements to their buildings, etc. So I think if we don't mind backing up a little bit and you can come to an agreement of what you want to deposit. And again, I'm talking about the operating account and how much we're going to say to the voters, we're going to deposit $1 million a year, and that's just a number, for capital. This is what we want to support, and this is what we want you to carry. And then we can talk about the other projects that can be funded by ARPA, or they can be funded by potential infrastructure that's coming along, or debt. So I think, does that make sense to everybody? I think if you have a dollar figure that you know that you want to work on, and then back into it that way.
I think what might be hard for, I mean, even with myself having some budget experience, like I think that there's a lot of board members that don't have that point of reference as to what is a healthy number that would look like. And so if you or Tracy have any guidance in that way, and then also if you wouldn't mind, if there's a way to give us the most simple, brief update of our borrowing capacity in terms of our current debt burdens. And I don't know how much those long-term leases impacted that capacity, but I think having like a overview of what has historically been done or what you two might recommend. Like, I think otherwise us coming up as a board that, even having worked on budget cycles, I wouldn't have any idea what that number would be super helpful.
Sure. So I did. Do you mind if I did reach out to the Vermont Bond Bank and ask them, what does that do to us with the GASB 87 change? And for those who are watching or not familiar with it, the way that leases are being handled now have changed. And so normally they're handled on your regular operating budget, lives in for simple terms, it lives in the beginning of our budget. Now it lives at the back of the budget where we actually have our bond payments. So I did reach out to them and I asked them, how is that going to impact? Does that lower our debt ceiling? And every year I ask somebody from the bond bank to come and give you that presentation. It tells you what our benchmarks are for Hartford and how do we compare to everybody else in Vermont. They've had some transitions there as well, so they weren't able to come. I did ask for something for this meeting, but it'll come in probably the next month, but we'll be well into the budget process at that point. Michael Gahn is the executive director there. He said that for years they've taken the leases into consideration. He doesn't feel as though the volume or the value of what we currently have for leases is a negative impact for our debt ceiling. I know that we had to make some changes most recently with some of the state revolving loan water and wastewater funds that had to do with the TIF district and then those loans, and we had to reduce some of our debt or repurpose it. Not sure if that's the best word to use for it, but I think as far as the debt ceiling goes, we're okay. I mean, we have some room in there if the voters would like to invest in some more debt. We do have some debt that's coming up that's going to be retired, so that's a good thing as well. Each of you could become more familiar. If you looked at the town report, it does have the debt schedules in there. It tells you when it's going to be retiring. Keeping in mind if it's a general fund debt or if it's infrastructure, meaning, an enterprise fund, because again, as Tracy indicated, those are paid by user fees. And we also like to take advantage of the 50% forgiveness that comes along with a lot of those loans. So keep that in mind as well. As far as the deposits go that have been made by the board, again, every board has different priorities. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, it's important for you as a board to even though you may not have supported a project that a board approved 3 years ago, we still have to fund it. And I think that's something that's always dropped off the radar. And most recently in the past couple of years, I know that there's been a couple departments that were on schedule for their annual deposits and the board chose to not make those annual deposits or reduced it, which then is causing a burden for that department for their replacement of equipment. And some of it's health and safety equipment that now they're kind of backed up a little bit to get that replacement done. So I'm just going to look real quick here on the totals that we put in for 20. Yeah, so for 2023, it looks like we did 818,000 is what was committed.
Say that again.
818,000 was committed to make deposits. And then for 2022,
Gail, are you in the budget?
I printed out the budget
Can
pages.
you tell me what page you're on?
Sure, on page 60 and 61 in the 23 budget that we're in. 23. In 22, we did $1,065,000. And in 2020, we actually only deposited 245,000. So that was a huge,
Was that the pandemic?
that was a huge decrease. And yeah,
That's
and
pre-
actually of that amount, the transfers, 197,000 of it was money that we transferred to solid waste. So 2020, we really didn't, we didn't do anything.
How about 21?
And 21,
Yes.
625,994. And then if you wanted to go back to 19, we did 362,000, and in 18, we did 452. And I think during that time frame, I was here, and a lot of the discussion that the board members had was it was cheaper to borrow than it was to save. And hence why we had such a fluctuation in making your annual deposits.
What are our current rates for borrowing if we go to bond?
I don't know what that is.
I think, I mean, that, or some of those discussions related to the, I mean, the cost of materials and inflation, even at the time, like, so if we needed a, know we're gonna need a new fire truck and we've been saving for 10 years and like, if we get on cycles, that seems healthy to me. Like, we know that, but if something comes up that we know we need, that we haven't been saving for, so say, we know we need something that's gonna cost $500,000. We haven't saved for it. Do we just borrow the money, or do we wait for, put $100,000 a year in a reserve fund for 5 years to save for it? Like, is it then gonna cost $800,000 if we wait that long? So, I mean, I do think it is prudent to, the things that we know for equipment and capital projects that we know we're going to need to do philosophically, again, I think it makes sense that we do feed these things. But if some big thing comes up that the town decides it wants, like a pool, for example, we've decided to bond for the pool rather than save, for 10 years at $300,000 a year, for example. Does that make sense?
So what are borrowing rates?
That we don't.
Borrowing rates. Lower.
I think the interest rates across the board are through the roof right at the moment.
But yeah, so in hindsight, we should have borrowed $5 million 5 years ago at 0% interest and built a bunch of houses, according to conversations that I've been having with people. That's really easy to do in hindsight, but we didn't do that.
For some of these things that we're looking at with the general fund reserve, bond bank, we have to bond for the useful life, which is why we end up with these 20, 30-year bonds. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I've misinterpreted the way Vermont's bonding works. And we're allowed to bond because the pool will last that long, a building will last that long. But bonding for our personal protective equipment for the fire department or our self-contained breathing apparatus that we replace on a much frequent basis is less advantageous to bond for. Those are the things that it is best to put those in our savings account and keep track of those. Some of the larger equipment, that the ladder truck, things like that might last a little longer. That's a really sore subject since we had to replace the ladder truck outside of its schedule. And the bonding, when you look at these others, right? When you look at a new public safety building, when you look at major infrastructure pieces, this is a more advantageous way typically to bond. That being said, we are in an uncertain time in terms of interest rates, and I'm sad that the Vermont Bond Bank has had such transition that we don't have our Ashley here anymore. Ashley moved because they're gone. But for the most part, when we're looking at the operating expenses, these really, because they're rotational, I hesitate to advise that we bond on reserve funding unless we want to look at a massive public infrastructure bond for roadways, sidewalks, and massive amounts of
That's
infrastructure.
why I would head towards it. Definitely.
Do you have a total for this? Like, I know it's not officially proposed, but this 24 list, like, what's the total of this?
No, I didn't put it together, so I don't.
For this one we're looking at.
Oh, I can,
Like, if we were to say,
projects in progress.
No, the general fund reserves.
Oh,
Do one of you have the Excel document open that you could just
The balance.
sum it, the annual deposit amount?
Annual deposit amount,
it's 1.5 million,
1.5.
1.544.
so 2020.
I'm just gonna put this 1.544.
But that, oh, sorry, that's, yeah, I'm sorry.
It's
that's
1.7, it's 1785.
Sorry, we did the balance of what we have.
Thank goodness for Excel.
1.785.
1.785357.
Right.
So with that, Tracy, that includes $1 million for highway infrastructure reserve. It indicates roadways, sidewalks, overlay pavement. Does any of that $1 million go towards the projects that have been listed here?
That is a hope. I will admit that Public Works told me that there was no way they were gonna get $1 million and it was a little bit of a pipe dream. So they would like to use it for some of their deferred maintenance and also to go out and do some significant roadway work. But they didn't think they were gonna get that. So I think.
But the projects that they listed here, would any of those projects be included in that $1 million that they?
In the ones that they haven't started yet? Yeah, hold on.
We're still looking at it.
Yeah. They would like to use the general fund reserves for, and sorry, I'm trying to get to this page and I'm like you guys juggling a ton of stuff.
I'm just wondering if, sorry, I don't mean to monopolize the.
No,
I'm just
no,
trying
no.
to understand. So if any of these projects are included in that $1 million, whether it's town match or leading up to it, then that maybe could open up a different discussion other than if this is $1 million that DPW wants that's separate from the projects that are listed here, I would have a difference of opinion on that.
Because we could cover all of them.
You definitely could take on quite a few projects that are there and maybe, stagger them. We do have a lot of projects that are going on right now, and you always want to keep your eye, at the end of the tunnel, but that means keeping the projects going and evolving. As one's coming up to being ending, you want to make sure that you have another one starting. So I think, can you clarify if that $1 million includes some of those projects?
It does include some of those projects, including one of the things that desperately needs to get done in the next year, which is on your in progress, is the Queechee Box Culvert number 24. Old River Road drainage improvements and High Pasture Road drainage improvements would all be things that are really on the forefront of Public Works' mind, and they think that those are definitely high priority projects. And I think we're now estimating the box culvert at $700,000. I believe there's some funding from previous years.
Yeah, we do have some money.
But that is a project where the cost of the culvert itself continues to rise dramatically.
See, so I'm confused here again, because if these projects are in progress, it's not clear to me how much of these are funded and what the remaining balance of what needs to be funded is. What happens if we don't fund it? Then it's just a half completed project.
It sits there with engineered plans until somebody picks it up. You're gonna see stuff like that in a lot of the water things. They've been engineered for years. They've just been sitting, waiting for funding.
But I don't see those here in the general fund reserve fund. Where would I find those?
In progress.
Oh, you mean where the balance is?
Right. Where the remaining balance of what needs to be funded is, because I guess I'm confused because it sounds like these first two that we talked about, the Route 5 sidewalks, should be listed potentially in the general fund reserve funds, right? Because we're really considering funding on two different tabs here. Is that correct?
I think I see where you're going. And the odd thing about the sidewalks is it's a grant. So it's not sitting in the general fund. It's just waiting for us to match it. So it wouldn't be sitting in the reserves because we can't touch that unless it's for that specific project. So you wouldn't see that as reserves.
Okay.
To just move through the process.
But it's nonetheless for us, for all intents and purposes, for us, it's going to come out of whatever it is, either our budget or our ARPA funds, right?
Correct. It needs to come out, operating needs to fund it at some point.
Right.
And so
Okay.
whether it's funded annually and you put the money in the reserve account and
Right.
that's used as a town match, or you decide in FY24 that you want to set aside the whole amount.
Okay. So then the thing that we're still waiting, we need to get a little more information on is the items listed in projects in progress, what the remaining balance is on some of those projects, including this culvert number 24. And And then which of these projects in progress or elsewise would be deductible from that $1 million sort of dream request from DPW, is that correct?
Or, yeah, or even just a potential list of what that $1 million could include. Like if DPW were to get that $1 million in their reserve account, like a sketch of what they would use it for.
Sure.
They would use it for the box culvert. And then this is where, again, I rely on them. I would ask them, I would say, okay, the select board gave you $300,000. Come back at me with what you think the priorities are. Because if we say, what do you want us to do? They're going to come back with multiple millions of dollars of work.
Sure.
So they're kind of looking for a baseline of how much can they have. So y'all are the parents kind of handing out the allowance. How much can they have? Because a perfect world, you're going to get an insurmountable number. I would love to see that we take care of the Queechee box culvert and then we allocate about $500,000 to $700,000 just to make sure that we can take care of that.
There has to be some more of that already allocated. I mean, that
I
has
don't
been
know off
in
the top of
progress
my head.
for 5 years at least.
We do have some purchase orders that we've been encumbering funds
Yeah.
for the Queechee box.
I mean, it can't be the total cost of it is not still outstanding. We have some money for
We had
that.
a couple $100,000, I believe, or maybe 4 total. I don't know.
I don't have my.
So I guess it'd be good at some point for us to be able to figure out what that number is. So that way, because it wouldn't make sense for us if there was $500,000 balance outstanding and we only funded 200 of it, but then it wasn't enough to actually complete it. It depends on if it's itemized purchasing that we're doing and then they're inventorying it until they actually get enough to complete it. Or if it's just going to be money that sits idly in that account, not being able to be utilized until we fully fund it, right? So I think we just need more information on what's remaining on that.
I am going to kind of be a little pushy. We should have done this 2 months ago, but you guys were doing other things this summer. We are writing budgets next week. So a little more information means we're kind of running out of time at this point. We need some sort of ballpark, some sort of guidance from you all.
But then
in
with
terms of
all due
making
respect, it
this
should have just been included in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, I mean, like every other reserve account basically says what it's for, and the highway infrastructure reserve $1 million request says what it's for. It does not include box culvert. Like I do think, like I think I could say right now, like, yeah, let's look at what does 1.8 million in reserve look like for what kind of impact does that have on the tax rate? And before we finalize the budget, we would like to see just a general list of what could be done with that $1 billion in a reserve account for public works with the understanding, we hear all the time that there's not contractors, there's not materials, like, can we even spend this money? Does it make sense? So in that case, if we got a logistical goal of how to spend that money, and then we might in the budget process say, okay, we're going to knock it down to 500,000 because we think that's all you're going to be able to spend in this fiscal year in that budget.
We can put that 1.785 in there. It's not hard to pull back out and you guys can take a look at that.
I mean,
Yeah, I'd like to see us look at some of these projects and get a sense of whether they're priorities or not, because we've got 40 minutes tonight, and we got to give some direction, I think. And plus, this all comes up when we do our budgeting too. It's a process, but I mean, I see some of these like, the box culvert, some of these like the work on Old River Road and High Pasture Road that don't appear to be particularly expensive and appear to be like things that were caused by climate change. But I mean, there's probably some stuff here we can get behind, I think, pretty quickly. And it might just help when the budget's being written by the various directors if they have a sense of which projects we're interested in.
The one thing that I see missing on this is Gate Street.
Gate Street is
Where's that at?
it's in progress. It's right here.
No, I mean Fairview Terrace, Gate Street.
No, it's in the other because it has not, we have $100,000 for engineering, but we need to, the board previously, so some of you decided to go with a one-way, but we need to have that further discussion. In light of all of this, is that still the direction that needs to happen? And if so, I actually see that as a bonding issue. That's a bond. Because we're looking at probably, when I asked Hannah and Jeremy to ballpark it in 2021 in the spring, we were looking at 3 to 4 million, maybe, depending on what actually is underneath that road when we open it up.
You know, you just cannot keep ignoring the fact that we have to do something.
So I think for things like that, you're looking at a significant infrastructure bond at this point.
Can we agree as a board that, I mean, can we get it on the March ballot?
For a bond, there's still time, yeah.
Okay, I mean, that, is there consensus among, I mean, we're not taking a vote here, I think, oh, that we could, I guess, but.
Would you like us to explore a significant infrastructure bond to include Gate Street and possibly other things in the other packet that you are finding to be a priority?
Well, I have a question about that. So my understanding is that there was $100,000 that was earmarked by last year, approved by voters.
No, well, just the general, in the general.
In the
fund.
general fund.
A
Oh,
bond.
so,
is separate.
sorry, in the approved budget, that was to be set aside or used to conduct an engineering study to understand what the true cost of that would be, right? So it would make sense to me that we spend that money that was approved for that purpose to actually get an engineering study so that we have a good, accurate number of what bond amount that we would then need to see, because that.
Then we have to wait a whole other year.
We can
Well-
only bond at town meeting day.
But what do we bond for if we don't know what the cost of the project?
Just get a big bond.
So
Just get a
when
big
we,
one.
Get a big bond for
when we
infrastructure.
bond, we don't have to, we're not,
Okay.
it rotates, you don't, if we don't spend it, we don't take it out.
Okay, great. Let's get a big bond. Let's get a big, huge bond.
I mean, I think
Why
that
not?
it will be interesting. It's always helpful to know
Yeah.
what the school bond requests are. Like,
Yeah.
I think last year the school didn't have any bonds on the ballot and, you know, that whole capacity. And Tracy, is there anything else that we would be having a bond question for on the ballot that you know of?
If I had a magic wand, I had a magic wand. I would, if I had a magic wand and you guys said, let's rock and roll with a bond, I would also consider putting the Bugby Center a full renovation. We own that building. We haven't done a lot of work on that building in ages.
Just got a new roof and heat pump.
Yeah, but there's a lot more. Mark's gonna come see you next week.
Okay.
If I had a magic wand, I would look at fire station number 2 in a bonding and an infrastructure bond. And again, I'm just kind of flipping through this. Definitely gates. And possibly looking at some significant HVAC work in the Department of Public Works.
What about water and Queechee, the water mains? in Queechee? Would that be different?
That is an enterprise fund.
Enterprise?
But if I had a magic wand and you all gave me carte blanche for an infrastructure bond, that's what it would be, is gates, Bugby, fire station number 2, and the Department of Public Works building, which if you've ever seen the moss growing off the side of one of their soffits, it needs.
So quite some time ago, we heard that not the salt shed, but the tent at the
The salt
DPW building needed to be
Yeah.
replaced, the roof.
Yeah.
What's the status with that one? I mean, that was a big ticket item too, as I remember.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head how much they were looking at. I think they were gonna get another quote out, but you're right, Lanny, I put that one in too, if we were going to.
That's high priority. We get that salt wet.
It's worthless, and salt just keeps raising in price.
We don't bundle that kind of thing, right? I mean, they would be individual bond or like individual, if we bundle it all and people don't want
I'm
something.
gonna defer to Gail, because we're talking in theories and. she's
Right,
my
so
subject matter expert.
last year I had some great conversations with the bond bank, and again, I did this year and asked about, so could we get 2 dump trucks? Can we build a salt shed? And can we pave Maxfield? And can we do the Queechee box? And what happens, all of those projects are eligible, and what they do is they take it's about the useful life, and it's the lowest useful life. So if you have 5 projects that you want to put together, and it ranges from a 10-year useful life to 30 years, you would have to go to the 10-year. Where you run into problems is you only have a very small window to expedite expend all of that funding. So if you want to combine equipment with a building and a sidewalk, how many years is it going to take you if you don't get them all done with the window that you have? So yes, can you do it? Yes. Is it something that you should do? I guess it depends on how much of a bond payment that you want, because again, the term of your bond will be set forth by the useful life of what you're putting into it. I caution putting certain things together just because I don't think it's in the best interest of the residents and what we could get the best bang for your buck for tax part of it. But if you're going to look at bonding, one of the other pieces that need to be added to it is Maxfield. Maxfield is the complex is an actual great place. However, their roadways is a mess. And going along with that, it's not just driving over potholes. You have to take into consideration, where does the water go? And we have responsibilities as a town to make sure that you have the proper, probably don't even know what the word is to use, but
Drainage and runoff.
drainage and runoff. And we don't have that. And we've been having a lot of discussions. So I think, making the priorities, if you want to think about bonding, doing bonding in maybe a couple buckets. And one would be things that would have a useful life of less of 10 years. And then you would have item in your other bucket, you would have a 20+ year or 15+ year bucket, and go at it in that approach to do that. I do think that we are running low on time, and I would really like to at least leave here tonight knowing that the board supports at least some of the equipment replacements. So when the department heads are doing their budgets, that they can at least include that in there. Again, fire department, Parks and Rec, WABA, so Parks and Rec have the ice rink, they have the pool. I don't see some of the items that are on here. I'm giving you recommendations of areas that I believe that you should be making deposits into. So again, the fire department, you have Parks and Rec, you have their equipment reserve, you have their pool reserve. Police department, police and dispatch, we've been doing an amazing job making sure that we're able to fund those equipment from the reserve account. Then you have IT technology. Let's not lose sight of that. We know we just had a huge server issue. So let's make sure that we're still funding those. So those are, for me as the finance director, I would love for you to make a decision tonight, at least on that. And I understand that some of the bigger pieces we may want to bond and put them in different buckets. So how is everybody feeling about that? Can we walk away tonight at least committing to making sure that our departments have the equipment that they need and we stay on track? And speaking of the ladder truck that broke, the fire department was one of the departments that had their annual funding cut, and they didn't get the amount that they wanted on that annual basis. So I guess for me, and Tracy, I'll let you speak too, but I would really hope that we can at least walk away tonight giving a commitment to the department heads
I think
for the
that-
basic things that they need to fund.
I think that unfortunately cutting reserves is oftentimes seen as an easy way out for boards when they're struggling to make the checks and balances run, when they're struggling to make the revenue and the expenditures work, because it's not right there in your face. You're saving for the future. And whether that's because a board doesn't, a board member may feel like they aren't going to be around for the future, so it's not their problem, whether they might feel like the world is going to change. But traditionally municipalities hit those reserves first. It makes me nervous. It makes me nervous because there are days where we break a ladder truck, we break a cruiser, an ambulance goes out, and it is really nice to have that money to say, let's go take care of what needs to get taken care of. When push comes to shove, that's the money that can be reallocated in a hot second if we had a catastrophic issue. When it comes to other things, those are harder for us to hit. What I would suggest that you guys do is ask me to look at either this number or a 785. That's without Public Works, or we can take this, put it in half and look at a 1.285. Those are huge numbers. I acknowledge, I mean, like, we haven't done those numbers in a while. But we could put these in the budget for you. You can see what it looks like along with all of your other guidance. And then what we can do also is look at a bonding capacity for two buckets, a 10-year bucket and a 20-year bucket. And show you what those look like.
I haven't heard any objection to board members not wanting reserve
Yeah,
funds. I feel like
yeah.
we're being
No,
talked
I just
into
wanna
something that we're
caution,
interested
it's an
in.
easy-
Yeah.
It's a sometimes historically an easy way. You see what happened at times.
One thing that I would, sorry to interrupt. I mean, basically, there's that last thing, it's the bridges, 150,000 for Public Works. Like, could we just encompass that up into the infrastructure reserve and then see what a general list of that looks like as we're going forward?
I think that Public Works wanted to separate those out so they could be a little bit more responsive and not pay attention to one side. Are you saying just have an infrastructure highway account? Kim, are you saying?
I mean, yeah, I
roll
guess
that up?
unless, yeah, I'm just,
Okay, but what I think I'm hearing from you right now is, and I think that there's a taste for it in the room, is what if we gave Public Works $1 million, what would they do with it?
right, and not just dip into that like we do the paving and. you
The
know.
little
Can
sips.
what would you think, what would the group think about just going line by line from the top down? Because I hear Gail's point here, and I think there's a lot of things on this list that we would probably unanimously agree, especially looking at this versus what was approved for the current fiscal year. A lot of these are actually reductions, and I think would be pretty easy to just, for us to sign off on and see where we are at the end of that. Because it feels like DPW and some of those different line item requests are the ones that we're really getting cut off on. Would that be, would the group
I
be
mean,
down to just do
For the
that?
sake of time, I would say if anyone wants to just pull out ones that they're, I mean, or are you saying you want to go through and
just say
say,
like,
verbalize what it was last year?
right, so fire and ambulance, right? This year request 181. Last year, I guess there was a $5,000, looks like. Oh, no, $81,000.
Fire and
Awesome.
ambulance last year was 180,994.
Where? what line is it?
FY 23 on page 61.
181. Oh, I see.
180,994. So there,
Was that the department, that's on the department headline?
that's under the board, column
Oh, far
118,
right.
22.
Great, thank you. Okay, so 181, so it's the same. So, I mean, is there any objection to the board? To me, I think that's fine to keep it as is, right? The next one is the tower reserve. Gail, do you see that on, was that on last year?
Now, the tower reserve has not been funded for a few years.
Okay, so that's.
And so that would be a new one that I certainly would recommend it. As is indicated here, it's got a 10-year lifespan and we do need to start funding that.
10-year lifespan, meaning 10 years from now it needs to be replaced, or from 10 years when it's built, it's gonna be replaced, when it's the actual end of life?
I'm going by the notes. I did not
This is the notes
participate
that
in.
Scott Cooney gave me, and he's pretty on top of this stuff. He's one of the best, because he's been around the longest, so
So saying
he,
10 years from now it has to be replaced, is that what?
Wait, I think
When your
he's,
lifespan, when your lifespan, I mean, I hear from birth to death.
Laney, it doesn't mean that the equipment itself is gonna fail in 10 years. It means that at this rate of $12,500, it would take us 10 years to save up the amount of money it would need to replace it. So it's not saying that the equipment itself is gonna fail in 10 years, but it just means that we'll be able to have that money on deck to replace it in 10 years, at 10 years at this rate.
I don't read it like that.
Yeah.
I don't read it like that.
You don't read it like
I
that?
don't read it like that, no.
Are there objections to other ones here, other than I know we're talking about the Public Works?
I have some objections. Can I say something? So for the capital information technology, there's only 10,000 listed there, and we've been doing 20,000. And I would highly recommend that we stay on that path of the 20,000, because a server alone, we know, is $100,000 to
I think that could show
$200,000.
some good faith from the board to the IT director. I think he was being a little conservative on his ask, and to hear that from you all would probably be pretty great for him.
Okay. And then as far as the DPW rec fund, they're asking for a 10,000 annual deposit. I don't support that at all. That fund is not something that's for reserves, and
Say that again?
the department rec fund, they're asking for 10,000. And I don't support that whatsoever. The funding that they're receiving through their infrastructure and the highway reserve is more than sufficient. And if there's anything extra that's needed, they can cover that in their operating fund. So I would recommend that you take that off the list.
Do you think it would be possible to just go from the top row down and
Oh, sure.
as you have objections that way? 'Cause
So
I
the
think-
tower reserve, capital information technology, I recommend the 20,000. Conservation and development, I think the 2,000 that there is more than sufficient. The next one, the Hartford Housing Development, the 30,000, I think that's important. It's for local match, for facilitating for housing. And I believe hearing the last few board meetings that we've had, we're all supportive of improving housing that's here in the community.
What does that mean though? What are we getting? That 30,000 that we're gonna pay there will go to what to match what funds? I guess that's the-
A lot of the grants that are coming up, it'll take care of a lot of the, we as a town do a lot of the hands-on stuff that goes for them. It also would include, I would imagine, researching and development of housing, and
So this is
in the
planning and development.
Yeah. It would be a planning and development reserve.
it wouldn't necessarily be the town is building a housing structure, but all of the work that goes into it is boots on the ground, and the research. The White River Junction revitalization, I can't even say that word, I'm sorry.
It really doesn't work.
We're doing great on that. And I'm sure that Lori's going to talk some more when she does her presentation. I know, Kim, you've been a very strong supporter of downtown. And I believe that Lori and Tracy have some great plans that they're working on, and it's important that we continue to put a little bit, and it's only $2,000, so I certainly would support.
And that's down from 5,000 last year.
Yeah,
just for reference.
absolutely. The police and communication capital, they're asking for a total of 50,000. I think that that's fine. I wouldn't go any less than that. They do share one reserve account. And I'll remind you, this year for fiscal year 23, they made all of their purchases out of their reserve account, which is really important to remember. Again, the rec fund, that's a new account that was established, and
Gail, I'm sorry, can we go back to that last line? To the police communication capital? Is that
50.
listed here on the budget?
No, it did not get funded last year.
Oh, I see. So it's just.
It
struck
did
out.
not get funded, and I actually included it when the encumbrances that's coming in front of you next week circles back to when we approved the FY23 budget. We said if we had any extra money in the 22 budget left over, that we would put that money into the reserves for police and dispatch. And we had a few other items too that we'll talk about next week. So I don't want to lose sight of that, but they did get dropped last year in the 23 budget, and we really need to put it into the 24 budget.
Thank you.
And then the highway infrastructure reserve, I think that we all agreed that there are additional questions that go along. What does that actually cover? So I think for the sake of time to get it going, I would say that you at least do 775. Ask them when DPW comes and they give their presentation, they tell us which of these projects that are here are included in it. Because it is separate. It's not used for equipment or anything like that. That's on the next line.
So Gail, with that, allocating 775, last year, the select board allocated 225, it looks like.
Correct.
Is that, what would be the rationale for us like doing a 3x increase on that?
Again, it goes back to if it's going to cover some of these projects that are listed here.
Yeah.
And either projects that are currently happening or ones that are going to be taking place in the next 2 to 3 years, you need to fund them. So do you take the burden all in that fiscal year when these projects actually happen, or do you start funding them now?
Gotcha.
So I'm saying if you did a ballpark number right now, say 775, when DPW comes, they're going to tell you of these projects that are listed here,
yeah,
that's what you're going to get for the 775.
Gotcha.
You as a board will have the opportunity to say, no, that's not a priority. No, that's not a priority. Or yes, it is a priority. You may move down to 500 or you may move up to $1 million.
Okay, cool.
But I think
easy enough line for us to.
I think for a starting point to, again,
Just to give them a rough idea.
yeah.
Okay.
And because we don't have all the specifics, I don't think you should give them the whole kit and caboodle to begin with. They should come back and say, this is what it's going to be used for. But I don't know, Tracy, if you feel differently about it.
You said 775.
Yeah,
I think that's a good ballpark for us to start knowing that you'll see what you get for your buck on that one.
so then the highway reserve, I think the 75 is more than sufficient. I'm sure that they probably have a similar equipment replacement plan, similar to what the fire and police and Parks and Rec do. So again, I think that that's fine. And then Parks and Recreation, their reserve for their equipment, the 35. I think that that's sufficient. Scott Hausler does a great job. Again, I knew Parks playground equipment. That's new this year. And I know that Scott's going to be talking about it when he gives his presentation. We have a lot of deferred maintenance in the playground area. And we know that with COVID and all the changes that we've been having, everybody has been striving to get outside. And so I would support looking at the 35,000 and you may want to reduce that or increase that based on what Scott brings to you when he does his presentation, but I don't think you should throw it out just because it's new.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll have a chance to look based on what the department heads tell us.
They'll bring this back to you and you get more
Absolutely.
specific things about what exactly Scott Hausler would do with that money in terms of modernizing the playground.
Absolutely. And then there's nothing for the Queechee Garden project. And then the WABA reserve, again, we want to stay on track. I think we've all seen over the years the improvements that we've made there. And we want to maintain our asset and protect it. So I think that that's definitely something that you should continue funding.
Gail, on that note, it went down from, that's 30,000, it was 35 approved for this past year, it looks like. Do you think that there was a statement of good faith to bring it down to 30 or?
I believe that it is. I think that Scott Hausler was very thoughtful in that process because he is asking for funding for the playgrounds.
Okay.
And also there's not a line item on here for the pool, which I'll talk about a little bit when we get to the end of this list. But I believe that he was being thoughtful in his request of reducing that. I wouldn't recommend that you go any less than the 30,000 for the WABA reserve.
Sure.
And then the Bugby Senior Center capital, I think at a minimum, I think we should do the 10,000. And as you're looking at bonding projects, if that is a larger project that needs to be rolled up into a capital project for bonding, that you have other ones. But I think for a placeholder right now, I think that the 10,000 at a minimum is sufficient.
And how much in the past have we put it in?
Zero.
We have not been depositing funding in there.
It literally has $48 in that account.
We have
not funded it in.
That is, I don't,
The capital projects that have taken place at the Bugby Senior Center have been paid in whole by the taxpayers on an annual basis.
10K is kind of low. What needs to be done there then? We're looking at long range stuff. Without a bond. Well, I know, but I mean, we say we have this word bonds, and we can use bond for everything, but yet anything we do for bonds is gonna raise the price action citizens. But if we put it in the budget, it's a little less every year. I mean, I don't know how much longer they can go along with it, but if we can put another capital improvement plan there off for another 5 years, put, say $15,000 into it per year, That's gonna give a pretty good nest egg to start with. I would say put 15.
I can mark down 15, and Mark Bradley, the executive director, will be here next week to talk to you all about some of his thoughts on the building.
We've
So
been so negligent with the senior center that I think it's.
I know you're there a little bit more. I know I've looked up at the ceiling tiles and been in the kitchen and met with folks, and
15
and
or
it's our
20,
building.
It's not too much to me. I would put 15 down. I would ask. For
I would be reluctant to allocate more than what's being requested in a case like this. I mean, it does seem like some of the bigger projects are gonna have to be bonded anyway.
That's placeholder.
Yeah.
Mark's coming in next.
I agree. I think it's a placeholder. And Lanny, I do respect and understand what you're saying about your feeling that that building has been neglected. In defense of the town, there is an executive director at that facility. And since I have been here, there hasn't been a lot of outspoken needs, and the needs that have been requested by that facility have been paid in full. So I do respect what you're saying, that you feel that it is a neglected facility. However, I don't believe that the town should take the full responsibility for that.
I understand.
And so I just want to make sure that I'm, in defense of everybody that's here, when there has been needs, they have been met.
We have
So
another director of the senior center who has some different ideas about improvements at the senior center versus our directors that have been there for many years. So
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
okay, so back to here. We're gonna leave it with the 10 that's there then, and
say-
wait for it to be changed when Mark
We'll talk to Mark.
comes next week.
I'll put an asterisk next to there, and we'll make sure that Mark hits that topic. I know he's prepping some work for you
Christian
guys.
Street Cemetery, I think we talked about that earlier. We don't have a really good feel of what it's going to cost to run that cemetery. It's very new to us. It's very young to us. And I think at a minimum, doing the 5,000, at the end of the day, if it comes back and it costs 60,000 to run the cemetery, the town's on the hook for it because it's our cemetery. So I think easing into it until we have a full year under our belt of how much it's going to actually cost to run it, I think that the 5,000 is an acceptable amount.
It's got a balance too.
It does, and those funds are specific for that cemetery.
I think that looking at this though, something in the back of your mind, Tracy, going down the road, you have to consider for cemeteries, because we're gonna have to look at cemetery.
That is definitely on our mind. We're holding on with the current structure, but if we, knock on wood, get a second cemetery showing up here in the next year, we need to really think about having somebody whose primary goal is managing these facilities, because they are very specialized procedures and facilities, and you need somebody that has that knowledge, and it's not me or Lana or Public Works.
All right, so everybody in agreement to leave the 5,000 there for Christian Street?
Yes.
The Climate Action Reserve, they're asking, there's 30,000 on here.
And this is for just, that was part of Dana's presentation about all the different heat pumps and like green equipment or.
Well,
like-
I think it also
does
helps with the town plan. I'm probably using the wrong language, so I'm sorry, but the town goal that they have to be carbon neutral by a certain date, I believe that funding will help support making that transition. And I could be wrong,
If
but
we're looking at like major HVAC reimaginings, let's say we're reimagining the Queechee wastewater plant's HVAC, and we're gonna go in and just modernize the whole thing. That's a different animal. This would be intended to use to supplement things. So let's say we have enough money for a internal combustion engine cruiser, and for another $10,000 to $15,000, we can turn that into a more energy efficient purchase. We would use that money for that to supplement those little things. If we wanted to go out and purchase e-bikes for the water department, so they stop using their truck to read meters, that's something that we could use that fund for. I believe one of the things that we ended up not using and we tossed around was the idle mitigation system on the ambulance that allows it to act more like a hybrid. We had saved up so much money for the ambulance, that was going to be an additional cost. So we thought there's an item that helps us move forward with the climate action plan that is a little extra cost that we want to, as a town, not ask a specific department necessarily to hold.
It could also be used in terms of like outreach and education stuff. in the past as
Exactly.
well.
Absolutely. I think a good point to go along with that. I think when the energy coordinator or the climate action committee, they come forward, and I think that they should give us details of what that's going towards, like very similar to our regular departments that we have. We know that we're funding X, Y, and Z because in year 10, we're going to make this purchase. So if they're asking for 30,000, they have 60,000 already. Where does it fit into the climate action plan that we have? What are we going to achieve by putting in this 30,000 this year and 30,000 next year? So I think for my recommendation as a finance director, yes, we'll use it as a placeholder, but when they come forward and give their presentation, what will it be used? What are we going to get for it? And what's going to be accomplished?
Okay.
That's my opinion.
I'm comfortable with it as a placeholder and pending details, but I'm also curious, it doesn't look like this was funded last year in the budget.
It was not. 2 years ago, I believe, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, we actually funded the reserve account from the local option tax fund.
Oh, I see.
It
So
was not, it did not come out of the general fund. The timing of the budget and when the request came through, we were not able to take it out of the operating account. And I think, Simon, you were on the board at that point when we did that. It was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So it has not been funded by operating.
I was just curious how that money ended up there, and then
Yeah.
and then I guess a question for Dana later would be what
Sure.
expenditures have been so far. So, great.
There's nothing for sister cities, the town office renovation. Tracy gave a great explanation about that. Are there any further questions about that, or do we want to leave it at the 117? Do you want more information?
I would like to know that breakdown of that heat pump system, because that seems an extravagant cost.
Mhm.
The heat pump system, because the ducting in this building is still, I would think, acceptable. But
Okay, yeah, let's drill down on what that
yeah,
looks
that's an
like.
extravagant amount of money. for
Mhm.
this heat pump.
So can we agree that we'll leave it as a placeholder with the request that additional information is provided?
Okay.
Yeah, just for everyone in the room, the math works out 117.8 times 8 years is $944,000. That's what it seems to be estimated at the cost of the heat pump system.
Gosh, and I have to think about this more. I know we're low on time, but at that point, how old will the building be when we hit that number, and what other things might come up in this building that we have to deal with? So that's definitely
We'll drill down.
food for thought. Maybe not necessarily entirely eat that meal this budget cycle, but we do need to start thinking about this building a little bit better.
Kim,
So I think we're probably not going to have time to get into the in progress and other.
Well, in progress, like those are things that we're digging
doing.
holes in the
We're
ground.
doing,
So
yeah.
we're,
Okay,
You
but
know,
in
we're
other, I
doing-
guess I
we're
had
doing
some
them.
questions about other two, but in even the reserve funds, like I feel like I've asked a number of times about, and maybe this would go into the public works reserve, but there's always this idea that there would be a mapping project of all of the underground infrastructure for water, wastewater throughout the town. And it's sort of another like fantasy project, like it's a huge thing what I'm wondering is that, are there reserve funds that we can be putting away for that? Like, it seemed like a very desirable project, but a big one.
So the mapping project would be funded solely by the enterprise funds. And when the enterprise funds, because that's the infrastructure
Yeah.
that they own, I don't want to say own it, but
Yeah.
it's not a governmental thing. It's infrastructure that goes with the enterprise funds. I would recommend that when the enterprise funds are being presented,
Okay.
that they include, we want to work towards this mapping process. And they do have some reserves that are currently sitting in each one of those enterprise funds that could be utilized towards it. Knowing how much it's going to cost, what the timeline is, that would be homework that DPW would need to do to bring forward when they give their presentation. This is how much the mapping project's going to cost. This is the timeline do we want to have it done in 3 years? Do you want to have it done in 2 years? What is the price of it? So I definitely think that that's something that should be on the radar and should be discussed, because we do have a lot of currently failing infrastructure, and we have more that's going to be failing. And I think
Lots of like institutions, you know, like it's very knowledgeable.
absolutely,
Employees that.
They call
absolutely.
that the silver tsunami, right?
Yeah, and we did try
doing.
doing it a few years ago, and we actually got a really good loan from the state of Vermont, the water and wastewater revolving. Unfortunately, there was so much transition in the town that we dropped the ball, and we went, you know, the loan opportunity expired, and we weren't able to capitalize on it. So definitely that would be another piece, looking at reserves, and will the state give us another shot to get that loan back, or a
Is that
different
program
loan and
still
get
alive?
it
Yeah.
correct and do the 50% forgiveness. So rounding this out, we have bridges. That is the last one. And I know that there was some discussion early in the meeting about bridges, and do we currently have any failing ones? What do we have for a list? So I think I certainly would support the 150 as a placeholder, but I also, you know, what is that going to cover? I think that they should come forward with a list of the bridges, and making sure that we're talking about town-owned bridges, not the ones that are state.
And that is something that we'll need to all kind of be very clear on, is which bridges are ours and which bridges are not ours, because we do have both of those populations of bridges in town.
Is there a significant amount of maintenance on these bridges, or are we saving up for something that could also be done through bonds?
I'll let Tracy answer that question.
I think what you're.
Like, are we setting aside $150,000 every year toward an eventual replacement of a
Towards
bridge?
an eventual replacement.
Because these are not operating expenses, right? These are capital improvements.
These would be more significant repairs or actually replacements. Bridges have a fairly long useful life, 20,
Right.
30, 40, 50 years, depending on a number of factors, like how big the span is, what type of span it is, how, you know, how caustic the water is, how all of that happens. These would not be like, oh, we're gonna clean some rust off and paint it. This is, we're replacing something significant.
Right, and so a bridge replacement, we're talking $20+ million. And if we were to get a grant for it, the town would at least have $1 million match for each bridge that we have.
Right.
So if you cycle them in and we know which bridges are coming up, you would probably have it would be easier on the residents. We wouldn't have to bond for the town match portion of it.
The VA cutoff bridge, 23 million. 23.
This is just a real simple question. It's just process. Could we recommend that what we've been doing today is we're kind of trying to fill in the gaps of what we don't know, that when we do this budgeting again, that the departments fill in that, or is it better to wait until they come and give us a report and then we question them? I just feel like a couple of times we've said, well, we'll wait for them, we'll put this in place, but we'll wait for them. Would it be more expeditious to have them do that?
When they come and do their budget presentation, they will provide you the details at that
Yeah,
point.
that will be the time that
Okay.
you'll.
So
sit
then you'll be
down.
able to ask your questions. I mean, they'll come prepared and give it to you in advance. You always get your budget presentation in advance. You'll have time to look at it. And then when they come, if you have additional questions, it's always best to get them to them before they come and do a presentation. However, if more questions come up while you're doing the presentation, I believe that the budget cycle is set up now that you will have at least one meeting at the end that you'll be able to have those follow-up questions before you make some final decisions of what you have.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
if you
correct,
have
Tracy?
pending questions for this department, this department, this department, at the beginning of December, we'll bring those departments back in for a second round. So say you have no questions for the clerk and the assessor, and they have those very small budgets with not a lot of significant capital projects. We'll say, thank you so much, clerk and assessor, for your time, but who we're going to take forward to the next round of concerns, or what you want to talk about or questions you couldn't answer, is to bring back the fire chief and, you know, the Parks and Rec director, and they'll come in with those questions. We did that a little bit last year when we were debating the firefighters. Scott Cooney actually came back again with some different numbers and walked through it again. So that, you know, you'll see those folks again.
Can I just clarify? Lanny mentioned that the VA cutoff bridge. Do we have all of the funds set aside that we need for that for matching, or?
It's 225 is included in that million, I would hope.
Okay.
Did I just say that out loud? I'm really-
You're so much trouble today. We have a
I'm
really, so I'm
really
enjoying
sorry,
it.
but I'm confident that when
Okay.
they put the $1 million together, that the 225 is included in there.
And the good news on that is we were saving up significantly for our match on construction, and we actually are no longer have to match construction. That is part of the federal infrastructure grant that they did roll out. We are okay on that. It is 100% federally funded on construction.
I
So
do,
that's the big 20 million, you know, 20
Yeah.
some odd million out of the 23 is construction.
we're pretty much out of time, but I do have a question about parking meters. I know that was something that Lanny brought up a couple meetings ago. It's something that I'm interested in personally. Is that something that would be potentially in a capital improvement project?
That would be a capital project.
Okay, so
I want to see,
like, how would we see that priced out and slotted? Lanny, is that something, I guess I would just
Last
speak.
year, we just asked about it, and then it was an item amount of
I
money
think
went in the budget, then it came
Okay.
out.
I think we tossed it in the operating budget because we were pulling it in and out so many times, and we just threw it into contracted services or something to say,
Okay.
this is what it looks like. If this is a go-ahead, we'll move it over into the proper GL, and it came out of that.
Parking meters, are something that definitely pay for themselves.
I would love to see it included, just
That'll be it.
who would be what would be the appropriate route to request that, just to be included so that we can see that?
Of course,
Yeah, we'll put it in the public works
Okay,
budget.
that would be
Is
great.
that an agreement? All of you would like to see what the,
budget rates? I'm drawing a blank.
I think it was.
Parking lots.
okay.
And it's something that we certainly discussed that was a potential to be covered by infrastructure funding too, but we took it out.
Correct. So the only one other item that's not listed on here for reserve accounts, and I know because again, Scott Hauser was trying to be very thoughtful, is we now have a pool. And very similar to our ice rink, we need to make sure that we're setting money aside to have money to keep that asset in the great shape that it's in and make sure that we're ready to do the replacements. So the pool is not listed on here for an annual deposit, but I would certainly hope that we can put something in there, again, just for, even for a placeholder right now. And then when Scott comes forward, he would be able to give you some more supporting details for it. So I'm just going to recommend that we put 20,000 in. Would be open to suggestion if you would like to do less or do more, or if you'd like to tell me, no, you don't want to put anything in, and then you'll wait to hear from Scott.
Be a placeholder or something. I mean,
Mhm.
it'd be good to hear from Scott when we can finally decide that, but probably good to have something in there just so we remember to discuss it.
I would like to know what the cost was and what the life expectancy is.
Of the pool?
Of the pool.
Those are two very important things to determine how much money to put aside.
Yeah.
Yeah, actual cost and lifespan.
All right, guys, we're hitting time.
And I'm gonna put about.
How do we
20
feel
minutes.
about how much progress we've made? Do we want another session at some point? Do we want to ask that we send any questions we have to Gail and to Tracy?
I mean, I guess it's the other category that I feel still needs.
So what I think I heard from all of you is funding off this general fund reserve as placeholders. And then that other category, looking at some bonding opportunities based on lifespan, whether that's a 10-year, a 20-year, or a 30-year bucket. What I can hear from you all on an email, even if it's just a quick bullet point list, is you look through that other list, what's your top 5? What's your top 3?
And the other projects identified?
But like, and that way I can compile that and provide that to you in writing to say, here's your secret ballot results of what everybody's top 3 and top 5 is, and we've been able to include that.
You want to
Are
specific
the others, are the others category?
Out of the others, so those are things that have been identified as issues. They maybe have been partially engineered. maybe partially, described, but they are not there yet. We have not actually started digging in.
So you want to do a top 3 or 5 from us?
Top 3, top 5.
Okay.
What do you think, Mike?
Top 5.
You'll say top 5.
Let's do top 5.
Send me an email.
Hit deadline on that just before we start.
I'm gonna have an overall memo for you on the operating budget on October 4th. It might be a little bit of a push for us also to do a bond on that. I
Yeah, I
don't
think
want
it'd be-
Gail and I to be burned out before this process even starts.
I think what would be helpful before the board gives their top 5 things is if they know what that $1 million, because it may
Yeah.
include some of these projects. So
That's true.
rather than the board put all the work into giving their top 5 without knowing if any of these are already included in there, I think if they knew, and then they could come back and say, these are my top 5. Does that
sounds
make
great.
sense to everybody? I
It
just
it
don't want.
does. And to add to that, because I know this is at the beginning of our chat, if we could just hear like a status update on those federal grants regarding the Route 5 sidewalks, just whether they are there or not. And then the other thing is that Queechee box number 24, culvert number 24.
Let's get an update on that. 'Cause
With the
that
bal- the
keeps
remaining
changing
balances
with
on
the
that
cost
would
of
be great.
concrete.
Okay,
You want a motion to go into executive session?
thank you.
Let's
That
take
was
a break
cool.
first for 10 minutes and then we'll do a motion for executive session and we'll have that. So we're going to be on break until 7:15.
Yeah, I'm here for a little while tomorrow.
I have to go to the corporate council. It's a vital communities thing. We're meeting with like the banks and stuff. So- Thank you.
So I, yeah, break. Is this off?
Oh, David's gonna put us officially on break, so Neil and I can check in. So.